Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Federation Hall. And if you're on Zoom, welcome to Federation Hall via Zoom. My name's David Sequeira. I'm the director of the Fiona and Sydney Meyer Gallery here at the VCA, and it really is my pleasure to welcome you here to Art Forum. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I do want to take a moment and invite you to ground yourself in the deep knowledge that long before the Victorian College of the Arts or the University of Melbourne was thought of, or before any of the studios were built, that the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people for generations practiced song and dance here. They made paintings, they made sculptures, they practiced healing, they shared stories. And we don't take it lightly that we get to do what we do on this unceded land. And it's with great joy and honour that I acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. Our guest speaker today, Patricia Piccinini, was born in Sierra Leone and lives here in Melbourne. Her work encompasses sculpture, photography, video and drawing, and her practice examines the increasingly nebulous boundary between the artificial and the natural as it appears in contemporary culture. Her surreal drawings, hybrid animals and vehicular creatures question the way that contemporary technology and culture changes our understandings of what it means to be human and wonders at our relationships with and responsibilities towards that which we create. So while ethics are central, her approach is ambiguous and questioning rather than moralistic and didactic. In 2003, her exhibition, We Are Family, represented Australia at the 50th Venice Biennale before touring to the Hara Museum in Tokyo. Other solo museum exhibitions include, now just excuse my pronunciation here, ComCiência at CCBB in Brazil, Curious Affection at QAGOMA in Brisbane, in Kaerlig Verden at Arken, Copenhagen, Hold Me Close to Your Heart at Arta, Istanbul, as well as numerous solo and group shows and biennales in Europe, the United Kingdom, USA, South America, Asia, and Australia. Notable curated group exhibitions include The Universe and Art at the Mori Art Museum, Global Feminisms at the Brooklyn Museum, and Face Up at the Hamburger Bahnhof, Berlin. Patricia's also curated two spectacular hot air balloons, the Skywhale 2013 and Skywhalepapa 2021. Her most recent exhibition, A Miracle Constantly Repeated, occupied the abandoned ballroom above Flinders Street Station in Melbourne for about a year. Was it a year? Yeah, for about a year. And Patricia, of course, is an enterprise professor with us here in the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music. Wherever you are, whether you're in Federation Hall or in Zoomland, please make Patricia Piccinini very welcome.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Yes, great. Well, I would also like to acknowledge that we are all acting and working on the lands of the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people. And I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I'm going to stick to this talk and hopefully we'll get some time to answer questions at the end. But if you have something that while the slide is on, I'll try and address it because it's quite an intimate group. If you put your hand up. Okay, so it's almost too obvious to say it, but for the last couple of years, things have been very strange for me. The pandemic has impacted on all of us in so many different ways. For me, I have this strange dissonance between a feeling that everything has been on hold and the CV that tells me that I've actually been quite busy. Since we first heard about COVID, I've had 6 major solo surveys, music exhibitions in European and Asian museums, which is amazing even to me. And I've only actually seen one of them. So I'm pretty sure that none of you have seen them. And therefore, I thought that it might be a really good time to have a look at them and some of the more local things that I've done in the last couple of years. I'm not going to walk you through all these exhibitions, but I thought I'd pull out a significant work from each of them and use that to discuss the major themes in my practice. I'll talk about why I make work and what I hope my work does in the world. Sorry. So those images that you've been seeing, these 4 images, are from an exhibition that is actually currently on show right now in Singapore at the Art Science Museum. And it opened about 3 weeks ago and it's up for about 6 weeks. But really, I'd like to start with something a bit closer to home, with a project that I've been very close to and very much a part of, and that is Skywhale's Every Heart Sings. These 2 giant 25, that's too close, isn't it? Is that better? Yeah. These 2 giant 25-metre high balloons were commissioned by the National Gallery of Australia and the Biennials Foundation. And they're now touring around Australia thanks to Naomi Milgram and her foundation. And just recently, we had an amazing performance at Corbin Oval in Melbourne. I'm told that 5,000 people came there. It was so affirming to get up and meet everyone on a green field near roosting bats in the middle of the city at 6 a.m. when the moon was up, and it was a full moon as well. We shared this incredibly awe-inspiring inflation as these 2 creatures came to life and then floated off into the air across the skies of Melbourne to Jess Green's song, We Are the Skywhales. That's Jess there. She's written this amazing pop song about the Skywhales. And we actually have a karaoke version of it as well. And it's going around, it follows us, and it's in schools and everywhere. I love this song. For me, this work I see as more of a performance than a sculpture. It's very much the culmination of a journey that began in 2013 when Robin Archer invited me to create a hot air balloon for the centenary of Canberra. That's just singing. She's an incredible performer and yeah, musician, artist. So the idea behind the original Skywhales came from reading about people who get the chance to look into the eye of a whale. And they say that these moments are amazing and their lives are never the same. They say that this close connection can be transformative. And I believe that art can also have that sort of transformative effect, or at least I think it should strive for it. That's me giving the address. I always give an address, which is pretty interesting, where I talk about the work. So anyway, and this is Corbin Oval in Melbourne, when the moon resided and the sun came up. So I researched whales and found that they evolved from small hoofed mammals, actually, animals that were mammals, and they went back into the sea. Lots of sea mammals like dugongs and dolphins. They're not fish, they're mammals. In order to adapt to this incredibly difficult environment, whales became gigantic and transformed in many extraordinary ways. And because whales are mammals like us, they don't have gills. and they need to breathe air. And unlike us, they are conscious breathers. They have to choose to breathe and when to breathe. And that means that they sleep in small segments. They never have really long segments of sleep. And they're never fully unconscious. So they really, really changed in so many different ways. I could go on about it. You know, their breast milk is like toothpaste, you know, and it's amazing. They breastfeed underwater and give birth underwater. It's amazing. And when you think about these amazing adaptations, the idea of whales seemed almost unbelievable. Like, how could this happen? The idea of these small, and they were kind of horse-like, they're like little donkeys, they're horse-like animals, becoming the largest creatures that ever lived on Earth is just so improbable. Yet it did happen, and evolution allowed it to do so. The idea that such creatures might have taken to the air rather than the sea, I think going to the air would have been far easier, is equally as improbable, but perhaps it's not impossible. But what if it did happen? If it did, what would it look like? This was the birth of the Skywhale. The idea is that we are just so fortunate to share the world with these whales. We're just lucky to be alive when they're alive. And anything could have happened. They could have been whales of the sky. And nature and evolution are amazing and wondrous. So I made a beautiful creature, a mother, a mammal with 10 breasts, made to nurture young and foster evolution. And the question, oh damn, sorry, and the question that I was most often asked, my paper went on the button, sorry about that. And the question that I was most asked was, understandably, where are her babies? And this is a fair question. And when I was given the chance to create a new hot air balloon about 8 years later, it was a question that I was happy to answer. The babies are with Skywhalepapa. That's them across Melbourne. Skywhale is the male of the species, and he's all about care. He's holding 9 young ones and he can't drop any of them. Now, it doesn't matter if these Skywhale babies are his babies or her babies or even their babies. There are all kinds of families in this world. What matters is that they are both caring for them. The point of the work is that care is something that belongs to all of us. Care is something that we can all share. And it is the carers who are the heroes in our community. And this is what I talk about in my little 2-minute speech at the event. So it's a really nice kind of affirming of these kinds of values in this very sort of public and neighbourhood way. This idea of care and its value to our society seemed to me to be worthy of making a gigantic work about. This work also shows us that care is not just for humans, that we can find care everywhere in the non-human world. And perhaps it might inspire us to think about our responsibilities to care for the other creatures around us. That's Bordertown. That's Bordertown as well. The thing about the Skywhale's performance is that it's an opportunity for the community to come together and have a shared experience around the production of cultural meaning and memory. Like, it is a memorable experience. Like, you don't get up very often in your life at 6 in the morning and meet all your neighbours and hang out there and it's freezing and the sun comes up and you witness the spectacle. There's song and people are dancing and And then you go home and it's still 7:30 and your day hasn't started. It is amazing. It's a memorable experience. So skywhales can only fly when nature allows them. And the work's ideas around care and the wonder of nature express values that are becoming increasingly important as we face climate change, war, and viral pandemics. The experience of getting up and getting together to share the dawn and see the work is incredibly life-affirming in itself. We come together in nature with the strangers who are our community. This is when we did the test. So far, the skywhales have been to Canberra, where they were born, Albury, Maitland, Watertown, Adelaide, Hamilton, Ballarat, and Melbourne. And they're about halfway through their national tour. And we're hoping that they'll end up in Araluen in Alice Springs. Oh, that's them. So after they go out, they have to be brought into an environment like this and dried out. And then they're put into their boxes for the next flight. And that's was a miraculous morning where they actually emerged out of and above the clouds around Canberra. Yeah, it was pretty awe-inspiring. So this show in Borås in Sweden opened up just as COVID emerged in the world in 2020. Amazingly, it still went ahead and had good attendances. It was based on an exhibition held in Arken in Copenhagen the year before. So it's sort of a variation of that show from Denmark. And the Danish curators who did it had seen my show at an exhibition in GOMA, like 2018, and they wanted to create a similar exhibition over there. It wasn't quite the same, but it had some of the similar works. The exhibition included some of my favorite works, and this is the one I'm going to talk about. It's called The Couple. It's inspired by Mary Shelley, who is one of my heroes. She wrote Frankenstein, which to many is a story about hubris and technology. But to me, it's actually a story about bad parenting. Dr. Frankenstein creates, this is Mary Shelley, Dr. Frankenstein creates life from nothing, which as a mother doesn't really strike me as extraordinary, because mothers do it all the time. But anyway, Dr. Frankenstein's achievement is to give the birth to a son. However, almost immediately he perceives him to be a monster, perhaps because the creature is not a perfect reproduction of himself. In fact, if you read the book, there's actually no reason why he doesn't like his own son. Like, there's no explicit region. He just looks at him and goes, ugh, and that's it. So Frankenstein rejects him and he throws him out, which is astonishing. The monster, who's never given a name in the novel, learns about love from spying on local villagers and understanding that people feared him because of his strangeness. The monster asks his father, Frankenstein, to make him a mate so he would have someone to share what he calls his wretched life with. And Frankenstein agrees. However, when his son returns to collect his mate, Frankenstein changes his mind and eviscerates the female in front of him. Like he just tears her apart. And from that moment on, there's just tragedy and violence and destruction. So yeah, the monster kills Frankenstein's bride, his little brother, all his siblings. He just kills everyone. And for me, the moral of that story is that darkness follows when we refuse to care for those around us. Mary Shelley's brilliant. Like, yep, that's it. And we need to allow them to have the agency that they deserve. And in the couple, my work imagines another outcome, one where the creature has his partner and they have escaped together and they have autonomy and agency. So this work depicts the very thing that Frankenstein feared, a couple connected and independent with the possibility to create their own culture despite their difference from everyone around them. Because as soon as you have the possibility to reproduce, you have the possibility to create a new destiny. That's evolution. The work speaks about our relationship to the lives of other creatures who we interfere with and control. This work also depicts a real and caring sexual intimacy, one where the male is so confident that he's able to relax in the arms of his partner. And this is a fairly unusual depiction in our culture. I can't name another image where I've seen that. The idea of chimeras, that's creatures made from different organisms, is no longer science fiction. Last year, a human pig chimera was nurtured to the point where its organs were transplanted into a human subject. And that man lived for quite a few months. As humans, when we change nature, we need to accept that we have a duty of care and that we can't keep on controlling what we create. We need to respect the agency and the rights of others, and that otherness is actually beautiful, as evidenced here in this work. In many ways, my work is about borders between us and others, borders between what we consider natural and artificial, the borders between good and bad. However, in my work, when we get close enough to it, we realize that hard borders don't exist. For me, these borders are always nebulous and permeable. And I wonder how useful these borders are now. In fact, perhaps they are actually quite counterproductive. Chimeras have no distinct borders. They're fluid, and that's why I love them so much. This exhibition, Between the Shadow and the Soul, at the Helsinki Kunsthalle, was another show from 2020 that amazingly still went ahead despite the COVID lockdowns. And unfortunately, but not surprisingly, I wasn't able to install the work or go there and do public programs or even see it, which was really, really disappointing for me because I'd worked really hard on this show and I'd been to Helsinki quite a few times, but I guess I shouldn't complain because it actually still went ahead. In fact, we only just got the container with all the works in it on a ship a couple of days before all of Melbourne locked down. However, I was able to make a new work for the show, which I'm going to show you in a minute. This is actually a really beautiful space. It was created by artists, for artists. And the spaces themselves are really interesting. So they had this big, huge, grand space with these enigmatic markings on the floor that people have used. And this is the installation. And then they have these more traditional spaces around the side. Yeah, and this was the work that I want to talk about. It's called Sapling. So I've made many chimeras in my practice because this device serves many purposes. It's a way to tell a story without the subject being too real. And this releases us from the often overwhelming implications of the ideas. This is also how myths operate, as a storytelling device. They're obviously metaphorical, but they're also strangely literal. Yeah, so sometimes the ideas that myths contain are so overwhelming that if they were about humans, we wouldn't be able to consider them because they would overwhelm us with emotion and we wouldn't be able to connect with them. And we need to connect with things emotionally to have an interest in them. So yeah, that's why most traditions have myths of some kind or another. But they're also interesting for me because in contemporary life, we are actually changing the way nature operates. Genetically modified, this is chimeras. Genetically modified hybrids and chimeras are literally being created all around us. Through science, we're now able to understand more and more about how organisms function at a fundamental genetic level. And what we've learned from that is that all organisms on Earth share the same 4 chemical bases in their DNA. That's how we know that all life on Earth, on our planet, is related. Certainly we're different, but we are all connected by DNA. Now, I've made many human, non-human animal chimeras, but making a human plant chimera was challenging even for me. Oh, and I was inspired mostly from an experience initiated by my sister. This is my sister Paula, who was the mayor of Manningham, and here she is photographed for the age in her efforts to save that tree, this ancient tree. Now, this tree is not like a birthing tree or anything like that, but it was a cherished tree by the Wurundjeri people. And it was standing in the way of the new multi-lane highway near Heidi Gallery. And the more I looked into it, and the more she told me about it, but we had a lot of discussions about this, I came to understand the importance and significance of this tree. And also how little such significance matters to us. This tree is hundreds of years old. It was old before Melbourne even existed. It has survived in that spot through everything, even the emergence of that petrol station. Like, that's the tree. I think there's like 3 petrol stations around it. Like this is an artwork. Like, this is, I couldn't have made this artwork. Nature made this artwork. Like, this is the most amazing installation I could imagine. Yeah. And as the traffic built up around it, it sat there, turning that pollution into clean air. And yet, when the time comes to build a tunnel to accommodate even more cars, it will have to die. And this seems sad to me. It actually felt tragic, actually, not just sad. we were all pretty angry in my family. I discovered a biologist called Robin Wall-Kimmerer, who speaks about the sentience and agency of plants, a kind of plant intelligence. And she also speaks about our interconnectedness. Sapling asks, what kind of a relationship can we have with the life forms whom we generally perceive as a mere resource, there to be plundered? Could our relationship be more nurturing? Could we connect with and care for plants and recognize their intrinsic value? What happens if we start to think about plants like people? So here you have a depiction of it's a paternal relationship between our father and a son. And this is a particularly masculine way of holding children. Like, I couldn't put my kids on my shoulders, but my husband did. And I love the two faces being close together. It's really intimate, it's really caring. And it suggests a relationship of nurture, but not nature being here for us being there for nature. This next show was from last year in France in Austria. And I think this is such an elegant installation. I love the simplicity of the rooms and the incredible color design. I feel comfortable saying that because, again, I wasn't really able to get involved in the installation due to COVID. So the credit for this beautiful installation must go to the people of Austria. That's the breathing room. It has in it a work called Kindred, and it represents a key theme, a theme of motherhood, which is a big part of my work. Motherhood is an idea that I've been exploring since long before I became a mother myself. It's a key aspect of human experience, yet it's rarely shown in contemporary art. Yeah, maybe if we're not mothers, we've all been mothered, or we haven't been mothered, and that's very significant as well. In this work, I'm using the trope of motherhood to explore connection on other levels as well. The dominating idea is that humans are intrinsically different from all other animals and therefore uniquely special in the world. And this idea allows us to treat other animals in the appalling way that we do. At best, animals are a resource to be exploited. They're only important for what we can get out of them. And in many cases, animals are an inconvenience, which needs to be ignored or just put out of the way. And so orangutans are facing extinction, mostly from loss of their rainforest habitat due to the encroachment from crop farming. It's mostly palm oil. It's a complex situation, and it's wrong on just so many levels. And it's a lot of nuances. Like it's not simple, and it's involving the exploitation of the developing world as well. And in the end, orangutans and their rights to well-being, that doesn't even feature in the discussion. And when I consider this problem, I feel a deep, deep shame. Yeah, because they're not going to be around in my kids' lives. As a country, Australia won't even legislate to force companies to tell consumers whether their products contain palm oil. So we are even denied the ability to use our market power to exclude palm oil products from our own shopping. And that's the thing about Mary Shelley. So she was an abolitionist, and she believed in she was anti-slavery, and so she didn't eat sugar, which is incredible, because sugar and slavery is what made her people rich, Great Britain. So that's amazing that she did that. And yeah, she's very inspiring. I'd like to not eat palm sugar as well, but palm oil. But yeah, it's unavailable to me. Although I sort of avoid those foods anyway, but anyway. However, I didn't want the sense of sadness and frustration to be the dynamic of the work. A shamed mind is closed and rarely able to act positively. I prefer to make a work where we witness the incredible fortitude and beauty of these creatures. And when we first encounter the mother in this work, we are struck by difference. The difference between her and us, as well as the difference between her and her children, who are both more human than she is. We realize that what we are seeing is a sort of spectrum where both the differences and similarities are brought into focus. And as we spend time with the work, we realize that what this piece is about is not difference, it's connection. We see and admire the incredible bond between this mother and her offspring, and we viscerally perceive our shared common animalness. We can see the small steps between us and her. She is like us, and we are like her. Sometimes this realization leads to a transformative moment for the visitor, and it is the power of this transformation of opinion that gives rise to the impetus to act and have agency around the situation. And it's that possibility is the reason that I made this work. Yeah, so last year, 21, I also had a show at the Kai Arts Centre in Tallinn at Estonia. Estonia is a really small country. It's like got 2 million people in it or something. But they have these really great art. They're really, really amazing and creative, and they have lots of artists and quite a lot of art spaces. And they have this space here, which was the smallest one of that year. And it was called Instruments of Life. And this exhibition included this work called The Cleaner. And it's a work that I made from my for my exhibition in Cannes, like 2020. And this work brings together a number of key approaches in my practice. It's not just the blend between two animals, a human and a leatherback turtle, which is what this work is made about. But it also brings in what I call the automotive side of my practice. So in this work, we find a creature that's conflated with a machine-like object in the form of that glossy shell. Cleaner is inspired by the possible extinction of leatherback turtles. These turtles normally eat jellyfish, but nowadays they often end up eating plastic bags by mistake because they look like jellyfish. And the bags or all kinds of plastic clogs up their system, and it makes it then impossible for them to actually eat jellyfish, even when they can find them. And they become malnourished and clogs up their system, and they just, well, you know the story, they kind of just starve to death. Some of these turtles don't even reach sexual maturity to reproduce, which is about 20. They live to be about 80. They just don't get mature enough to reproduce. And it's a tragic story, and it's depressingly common in marine life. And like the issue of widespread coral bleaching on the Great Barrier Reef, people have been very aware of this problem for some time. And the problem is ongoing. Tragically, we've just had a recent coral bleaching this March. And so coral bleaching, by the way, is a terribly disingenuous and clean sounding name for what actually is a massive coral die-off. And scientists around the world are trying to find solutions for these environmental crises. And Cleaner, this work, represents this in the form of attaching an undersea vacuum cleaner to a genetically modified turtle. Hopefully, this would suck up the plastic waste before it reaches her mouth. Now, obviously, this is a desperate and somewhat ridiculous and fantastical solution, but it comes from a very positive desire to do something. So Cleaner imagines an inbuilt technological adaptation that enables her to be protected from eating plastic, while simultaneously cleaning up the mess that we've made in the waters. The work asks the question, to what extent do we need to intervene in the environment in order to ensure some of its survival? And what kinds of solutions are we willing to back? Is technology the solution to the problem, or the problems created by technology? When we consider the kinds of interventions that coral polyps would require to fortify them against warming waters, so that's the barrier reef, questions arise. And it's amazing that a lot of the discussion around changing the polyps still centers around, you know, would the resulting organism still be natural? And does it even matter anymore? Like, we're still debating that. This show was recently on in Poland, in Turin. It was a substantial and beautiful exhibition, and I did have plans to go. Actually, I was going to go for the closing, but of course there was the war in the Ukraine, and so I thought it was, I don't know, I just thought it wasn't a great idea. However, that show did go ahead, and it did connect with many audiences despite everything. So this was like a few months ago, like at the beginning of the year. It's interesting how all the shows are quite different. Like, Austrian one's really bright, and this Polish one is really dark. I love the way people have different, like the one in Singapore is really, really ordered. Yeah, I love different cultures' sort of interpretation of the work and how they present it, because after all, it is their museum. Like, I can interfere, but only so much. They have their own, like, lots of things dictate, you know, like the size of the space. Just there's so many things are a part of the process. And this museum was very interested in film, so had that sort of very filmic sensibility. So, and it included this work, Sanctuary, that was commissioned by the Beeson family and Tarawara for my exhibition in 2019. This work was partly inspired by bonobos. And like all primates, bonobos are facing dire straits from climate change, but also from the pressures that globalization has brought to the country where they live. Bonobos are especially interesting to me because bonobo society is basically matriarchal. They are almost physically identical to chimpanzees, which are violently patriarchal. However, bonobo society is totally different. Bonobos are cooperative. There's hardly any violence or infanticide. And there's a lot of sensual and sexual interaction. Bonobos show us a different organization to life and how it can be. So we actually didn't realize that bonobos were a different species from chimpanzees until about 40 years ago. And then scientists went, oh, these guys are genetically different and they don't intermix, they don't reproduce. And I really wouldn't advocate that we, acted like bonobos. Like, I'm not saying we should, because they do some pretty intense things, lots of intense things that aren't great for humans. Like they have sex with children, but that's just their thing. They use sexual intimacy to placate and to resolve issues, which is a great tactic. It really works for them. I'm not sure it's for us, but it just shows us that it's, there are other ways you can be, even though you look exactly like someone else, which I think is really cool. So I really like these guys. Sanctuary is all about maturity and sensuality. It struck me how rarely this is ever depicted. And it's been striking me more and more as the older I get. Unless it's trying to sell you a place in a retirement home, then you see a lot of it. I wanted to create a work that speaks about the value of connection at any age and how beautiful that is. I often make these works depicting relationships, active relationships between older subjects, between lovers, between mothers and children especially, between fathers and children, more so a lot now with Skywhale. And even though, and I do this a lot, even though they aren't the usual content of fine art. And I do it because I feel that this is what is important in life. And to me, it's incredibly strange that it's not what we generally see in galleries. I don't get it. But yeah, so I do this. And you know what? It's often, sometimes it's quite trivialized. My work's often slightly trivialized, but soft, it's emotional, blah, blah. And I still think, actually, no, it's really hard. Like, it's really hard to put a work out like this out there. People can vehement responses to it. Like it's really confronting for people. It really triggers people because they're moved by it. It actually moves people. It's not easy to do. Spent a lot of time trying to figure out the morphology, what pose. Like, we all understand body posture. We can read it. I don't even have to talk about this work. You understand it just by looking at it. And that's what I do. That's my work. But that's the majority of what goes into a work like this. yeah. And so I'm coming to the end now, because I'd like to finish this talk by returning to Melbourne and to showing some images from A Miracle Constantly Repeated. And this exhibition was commissioned by the Rising Festival, and it was in that amazing space above Flinders Street Station. Did anyone see it? Wasn't it amazing just to be in that space? It's like, whoa, it's like incredible. And amazingly, that space is now going to be used for the festival every year, which is so good. But this show was really special to me because it was in my hometown. And it was an incredible opportunity to work with this space. Like, I had to really think about, well, actually, I had to, well, I did and I didn't. They said we couldn't touch anything. So we couldn't even put a nail on the wall. If we put something on the wall, we had to use an existing hole. Like, we couldn't touch anything. We couldn't even clean up the floor. All that liner that was broken up, couldn't, you know, tripping hazard, couldn't change it. So, but it was okay because I just thought I'll just work with the environment, and the space is going to be a big part of the show. A Miracle Constantly Repeated. This is the diorama that was the first thing you saw as you came in. So it was about a lot of things. It was about resilience. It was about rebirth and our relationship with nature. It asked how we can arrive at a new understanding of nature that is progressive and positive to all species on Earth, including humans, but not just for humans. And this was the space that was the library. And then it became a space where people did all the administration for the train company. This is the new work that I made for the show. Everything in the exhibition was blended. And in presenting this, I wanted to discuss how this construction of humans as separate from nature is so unreal and probably superseded. Oh, this is the film we made in between lockdown. The show was full of abundance and the vitality of life. The idea that life lives, just that, life lives, was a big inspiration. There were lots of births and signs of fecundity. There were fruiting bodies. There were flowers and gardens. There was ultimately in the ballroom a culmination and in this sort of very celebratory space. Yeah, this was the gym that had a very high ceiling, so we could put this new part in there which hung from the ceiling. So eventually you got to the ballroom, which is here. It was like, and Jess Green did the soundscape for that. It was just like, yeah, it's just like party time, because everything else was so, there's a lot of doing in the work, a lot of thinking, doing. And here there was a lot of being. You know, you could see yourself reflected in surfaces and being in the music, being in the moment. Yeah, and spectacle and colour. Oh, I did a residency at the Glass Workshop in Canberra, and I made heaps of glass, which is really great. Oh, these glass boots, boot camp. And I began to work on the show in 2020 when the horrific fires were, and they were very fresh in my mind. And so I made this work, which is a work that gestures towards that time and some of the key themes that came from it. As I said before, I'm interested in making works that motivate action rather than shame. And I hope that I can suggest that even as individuals, action is possible and valuable. I saw this, did anyone see this on the news? I just thought, I want her to be our Prime Minister. Like I want her to lead us. Like she ran into the burning embers in her sand shoes, took off her top and picked up this koala, burnt koala, brought him back to the car. She stopped the car in a fire and gave him water. And then brought him to a hospital, not a hospital, a kind of makeshift. They had so many areas where volunteers looked after koalas, and they had them in these baskets. And those baskets with koalas, that image went all around the world when those bushfires were. It was just a very potent sign. It was tragic, but very optimistic. And so out of the devastations of the fires, I wanted to highlight these images we saw of people actually doing something to help other animals around them. And this work, The Rescuers, is a commemoration of those brave people who acted to help their fellow animals. It's also a reminder of how much of the burden of climate change will fall on our children. Yeah, like I'm on my way out, but my kids, they've got that burden of saving the planet, which I think is pretty unfair. It comes out of an idea that I call speculative optimism, which is all about the depiction of how our relationships with the world might be, rather than how they are. This is so that we might have something to aim for. While we can't ignore the problems that surround us, we need to imagine the world as we might want it to be in order to move towards it.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Like, it's just such an exquisite career, and you've been so generous taking us through, some of these projects. Well, it's not all of the projects by any means. We've got a few minutes for some questions. So I'm wondering if anyone has a question for Patricia. Yeah, please.
Recently, we were able to have a look at the Parkville railway station. We were delighted to find the floor for commission there. Without revealing anything that is still work, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
Yes. So that space is a particular space. You can't go in from the back. You have to go in from the front. It's a space on the wall. It has to be cleaned by water. It has to be bomb-proof, shack-proof. And it has to operate with all kinds of different people. And a lot of them are people that are going into hospital for treatment, and they're already heightened space. And also, there's a lot of students there. It's a medical area, so there's a lot of innovation. It's a very, very heightened space. There's a lot going on. And in this new space, it's beautifully designed. It's got big atrium windows with lots of natural light going, which is amazing. It's very deep. And I just thought, well, I don't really want to do work like this, where, I mean, these are ethically related conversations that I hope are inspired. Like that's what I hope to inspire by these works, and a connection to that. And I recognize that, you know, it's only for a certain group of people. But I needed, it's not that I'm getting to the answer. And so what I really wanted to do was I wanted to make a work that was almost like color therapy. And like colors do affect us, just color is mood, just like music is mood. Color is also mood. And I wanted to make a work which is nurturing. Like I want to hold people as they go down that escalator, which is how you encounter the work. So you're already moving and pretty active, and you're balancing on this, you know, this what sometimes seems perilous sort of stair that's, you know, very deep. I just wanted to have this work where you could almost use it as a kind of point for meditation. And so what it is a big color field of really beautiful porcelain tiles, and the variations in these color are the intrigue and the kind of point of the work. And these colors are the colors of spring. And spring is in itself another optimistic time of the year, because it's full of potential, it's full of new life, and people feel good in spring. And so, like, even I'm reading *Sapiens*. Have people read that? It's so great, so good, because I just think, oh, I'm just like this guy, these sapiens that were here 200,000 years ago. It's like things, we react in the same way to things. And so it's a work which is about color and a kind of, it has a calming effect on people, you know, and I would hope that people come in every day and sort of feel the vibrations of this color. And color is light of vibrations, and use that time to kind of, I can go now and get my therapy. I can go now and do my hard work. You know, I can go now and take the bus, the train home, the bus, you know, and so it's a work like that. It's about care and nurture, which are what I'm really interested in. And I try and, you know, valorize in my work as a theme, but in a different format. So it's a big color field with different beautiful gradations of color. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We look forward to it.
Me too.
And we've got one more question. So just hang on, I've got time for just one more. I'm going to take your question here, please.
Would you be interested in bacteria or viruses and making them human in that way we can relate to that form of life as well?
I'm interested in everything. Yeah, that does sound interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it does. Sounds slightly scary, but then a lot of people are scared by bats, and now I really love them.
We're gonna leave it there. Patricia, if you wouldn't mind just hanging around for a few minutes after the talk, you could come and say hello and perhaps ask your question then. But really, Patricia, on behalf of everybody here, just thank you for being part of the university community, but also thank you for the richness of your career and the generosity of the talk today. Thanks so much. Please join them. And just one little piece of a community announcement, and I can't remember who asked me to make this announcement, but here's the announcement. We would like to invite you to an all-access interdisciplinary group critique tomorrow and every Friday from 1:30 to 4:30 in the Maudsley studio room in the painting department. So whoever that student was that asked me to make that announcement, they asked me to make sure everybody felt welcome there. Okay, so I'll see you next week for Art Forum with our guest speaker, Professor Natalie King. Thank you for being here. Cheers.